I feel like kids nowadays do not realise how lucky they have it. They've got Netflix, they've got Disney+, they've got Prime, or the other 3 million services you now have to pay for. When I was a kid, we did not have streaming services. We had VHS tapes. And you know what that means? That means that some of our favourite movies are fucking shit. Because we didn't get a choice. We didn't have thousands of films or TV shows that we had access to. We only had what our parents bought us. So that's why some of my favourite films growing up are things like The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, or The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle, or Alaska. And if you've never heard of Alaska, I don't blame you, no fucker has. Another one of my favourite movies growing up was The Scorpion King, which is the subject of today's video. I loved that film. I thought that film was great. I thought it was so good that one Christmas my mum decided to treat me, and she bought me the DVD for The Scorpion King 2, the sequel. I watched that film, and to my recollection, it is the first film that I ever turned off because it was so bad. When I was younger, I always prided myself on watching anything, like I could be entertained by any film, and even nowadays it's the same thing. Even a bad film has its merits, because you can learn from a bad film. You can enjoy the silly moments of a bad film, especially as someone who makes films and does editing and stuff. Like, watching a bad film teaches you what not to do. So there were very few films that I would ever turn off. I would always watch them to completion. This one is the first one that I remember turning off. So for the first video on my new channel, I am going to watch... Everyone's heard of the first one, and a fair few people probably know there's a second one, but there is a third and a fourth and a fifth. And there's also rumours the franchise might be getting rebooted soon. So if this video happens to coincide with that, that's going to be really funny. So my intention for this is I am going to go through each one of these films bit by bit and analyse them with my grown-up brain. And as you can probably see from the runtime of this video, it is a very long process. As of recording this, I have only seen the first one. So the idea is that I'm going to record each one of these one by one so I can gradually build upon the experience. And what I want to know is, if the second one was so bad that a young Brad who loved The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen turned it off, how awful can this franchise get? Was the second a low point? Oh yeah, and also, I just bought this and one of the little clips inside is fucking broken. Look, this little thing that holds this thing, it's broken. Before we get into the first film, there might be some people out there who actually don't know much about this character. Because for me, it was a big part of my childhood, but other people, they may not have even seen the films where the character comes from. And if you haven't, that is a crime. Go and watch them. So the character of the Scorpion King comes from the film The Mummy Returns, which is a sequel to the film The Mummy, which is a remake of the film The Mummy. And The Mummy and The Mummy Returns are both excellent films. They star Brendan Fraser as Rick O'Connell, and it was during the period where he was in all of these action films, and he's fucking amazing, and those films are great. Go watch them if you haven't. They are fantastic. The Scorpion King himself was created to be this warlord tyrant who appears in the prologue of The Mummy Returns and is trying to basically take over the world. He is defeated, and in his defeat, he makes a deal with the god Anubis, the god of death in Egyptian mythology. I hope that's right, someone's going to correct me if it's not. Anubis gives the Scorpion King his army to finish his conquest, but in return for the Scorpion King's soul. So in the future, the plot of the film is that several baddies want to kill the Scorpion King because doing so grants them the ability to use the army of Anubis. When casting for the role of the Scorpion King, Stephen Sommers, the director, wanted to get a big wrestler. And he was looking through the roster, and one of the people who stood out was Dwayne The Rock Johnson. So nowadays, we know him as Dwayne Johnson, as he appears in a lot of films, but back then, he was exclusively known as The Rock or Rock. But at the time, The Rock was looking to expand his career. He'd done some books, he'd done some television appearances and stuff. He was looking to break out into the movie business, he'd always wanted to. So he was offered the role of the Scorpion King. And when they were shooting with The Rock, everybody could tell there was something about him, something that was going to make him a big action star. Something we know is true. He is a big action star now. They were watching him and they thought, you know what we could do? We could take this character of the Scorpion King and we can spin him off into his own movie. They'd already announced they were going to do a spin-off movie, which would be a prequel of what we see of the Scorpion King in The Mummy Returns. And that is what the first Scorpion King movie is. It's a prequel supposedly set 10 years before the events that happen in the prologue of A Mummy Returns, where we get to see how the Scorpion King became the Scorpion King. As mentioned, this started a franchise. Altogether, there have been 5 Scorpion King movies, and as far as I'm aware, The Rock is in one of them. He might be in the other ones, I have not seen them. But I don't remember being the second one. I think that was one of the things that disappointed me. The Rock wasn't there, it was some other chucklefuck. The Rock was, however, in the video game that came out after the film called Scorpion King Rise of the Akkadian. And The Rock reprised his role as the voice of Matthias, who is his character. I think that game is also a prequel. I'm not sure if it's canon. I'm not going to be looking at that in this video, nor am I going to be looking at the game that came after this, The Sword of Osiris. Yep, just checking that's what it's called, because I'm pretty sure the Spear of Osiris is in the films as well. I think that was a handheld game, like Game Boy Advance or something. I'm again not going to be looking at that. I'm also not going to be looking at the comic books or the book. So obviously a character like this gets spun off into a bunch of shit. There were 2 comic books that I think took place before the film, The Scorpion King, and then the book takes place after The Mummy Returns, where he comes back. Again, I don't know how much of this is supposed to be canonical. I'm just going to be looking at the 5 films here. That's my main focus. If this video amazingly happens to do well, maybe I could do another one where I look at the extended lore, but I don't think anybody really wants to see that. Anyway, now that we've gotten that little crash course of the Scorpion King out of the way, it's time to begin with the first movie. The Scorpion King is a 2002 action movie directed by Chuck Russell and starring Dwayne The Rock Johnson in his first ever role as a leading man. As mentioned before, this movie is the origin story for the character that The Rock plays in The Mummy Returns. Now, I'm going to call him The Rock because all the behind-the-scenes stuff called him The Rock, and it's funnier and cooler to call him The Rock. I know that he goes by Dwayne Johnson in his films now, but The Rock is way cooler, so he's going to be called The Rock all the way through. He is Rock. For anyone who was wondering what era of film this came out with, because 2002 does just feel like a long time ago, because it was 22 years ago. This film lost out for a Saturn Award for Best Fantasy Film to The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. Obviously this goes without saying, but there's going to be a lot of heavy spoilers, because I'm going through this film quite literally scene by scene. So if you haven't watched the film and you want to watch it before I talk about it, go away and watch it now and then come back. The movie opens inside a cool-looking hut in a snowy landscape, where we are introduced to the first villainous character of the movie. If you needed any evidence that this character is meant to be villainous, he's shouting about the number of people he's killed, he's about to murder somebody, and he's drinking out of a skull. While he's going on this rant, we cut away to a mysterious hunk outside who's carrying a big rock. Who could it be? 3 guesses. Just before the tied-up prisoner is about to be killed, our hero enters the scene by dropping into a fucking chimney. I get the point. I get that he's trying to fill the room with smoke for his jazzy entrance. But he just landed on a fire. That's not okay. But he is okay, because he's The Rock. While everybody's confused, 4 arrows fly simultaneously out of the smoke and kill 4 people. Not just kill them, obliterate them. They go flying away. And then, here he is, Matthias, The Rock, strides out of the fire. I'm going to say this, one thing that this movie definitely has going for it is that the fight scenes are great. There's very few of the fight scenes that are actually terrible, and most of them are pretty well choreographed. The camera angles are fine. There's not a huge amount of like the excessive cutting. There is a lot. Like these kind of action films always had a lot of cutting to make up for any like failures in choreography and obviously the performance of the actors. If anyone does something wrong, you just cut around it. But it's not like Taken 3 or Iron Fist levels of hundreds of cuts. And also the guards do look like they're attacking. They do one by one occasionally, but they look like they're engaging in combat. There's not just someone stood there like this, waiting to get killed. And obviously, The Rock, being a wrestler, this was during his peak. I think at the time he was like 6 times WWE champion. He's extremely fit, and he's used to combat. Particularly, he's used to theatrical combat as well. But even though this fight scene's amazing, it's still really funny. So the next action that The Rock takes is to draw 4 more arrows onto his bow. The lead bad guy jumps out of the way, because I'm guessing the 4th arrow was meant for him. But 3 of the arrows impact 3 of the men. One of the men flies into fucking orbit. How is this man able to fire an arrow with such force that it sends somebody flying hundreds of meters? So Matthias draws his sword. I don't know why. He's just proven he can fire arrows that obliterate people and send them flying out of the room. Why not just carry more arrows? So during this fight scene, somebody jumps onto The Rock's back. The Rock is pulling the dumbest expression I have ever seen, and I can't account for why. He doesn't pull this in any other scene when he's doing action, but for some reason, he's going... All through this scene, there is somebody throwing knives at the man who's tied up. The man who's tied up is The Rock's brother, and misses over and over and over again. It's like a knife-throwing performance at like a carnival or something, where all the knives are like next to his head, under his arm. I'm surprised they didn't have the obligatory between the legs crotch shot. The only time this guy gets one on target, The Rock throws somebody in front of it. But don't worry, this man does not get away unscathed, because The Rock punches him 1,000,000 times. Towards the end of this fight scene, the big villain who was there at the start drinking from the skull pulls out these weapons. But something I noticed when I went through this scene frame by frame is that the weapons that man has have retractable blades on them. You barely even see this. It's there for like a few frames, you hear the sound effect. But without going through frame by frame, you probably wouldn't know. So, why? Why go to the effort? Was he meant to have a bigger part? Or were these things meant to be more visible? But like, he pulls these things out and he's like, it's like, yeah, I'm the best. And it's like, why do you have them? Who made these things? But yeah, that guy gets yanked into the ceiling. There's loads of fire. The Rock drops a one-liner. First scene, bang, over. Great scene. 10 out of 10, no notes. So this is where we get a narration that introduces us to the story of the film. So there is this big band of evil warriors, and these people appoint their strongest warrior as their leader. And this man is known as Memnon, or King Memnon, played by Stephen Brand. Of course, he's British because he's a villain. They say in the film that the reason why Memnon is so victorious is because he has a sorcerer on his side who can predict the future. I think it's really funny that their chosen, like, greatest warrior is a guy who won't go into a fight unless he knows he's going to win. The other thing about this is that we find out in the next scene that the people are aware that the sorcerer exists. They know that Memnon wins because he has an advantage, because he knows the outcome of the battles. So if this is true, why would his enemies not just be like, okay, if he comes to attack us, then he knows he's going to win, so we should run away. If he's not attacking us, that means he knows he's going to lose, so we should go and attack him. So we are taken now to a meeting of the last of the free tribes, and the king there is saying to everybody that will they fight if the sorcerer is dead? And his plan for this is to hire some assassins to go kill the sorcerer. It's a pretty straightforward scene, there's a lot of overacting in it, and fucking Peter Facciarelli, Carlisle Cullen, is getting his fucking paycheck for this scene.
Silence! My father has called for silence! Hold your tongues!
There's also Michael Clarke Duncan, who steals every single scene he's in.
If I'm no king, why are you on your knees before me?
There's a bit of a disagreement in the camp, but then the assassins arrive. They mark their entrance when Matthias throws like a little sickle thing at Michael Clarke Duncan, whose character's called Balthazar. I think it's probably start like calling the characters by their names, but it's just more fun to call them by the actors' names. And we all know them as the actor. No one's going to remember Balthazar. But if you go through this frame by frame where the little sickle thing lands on Michael Clarke Duncan's hand, it doesn't come from like far away, obviously. It comes from below. It looks like there's a child doing it. It looks like there's a little kid below going, eh! The assassins pull down their hoods and they reveal that it's The Rock. You don't see the other people's faces. You don't even see them take their hoods down, which implies they're gonna die. Like, they're not in a lot of the promotional material, they're not really in the trailer that much. They're not gonna last the next 10 minutes. So the negotiations happen, and the assassins, Matthias, his brother, and the other guy, who never gets a name as far as I'm aware, it's probably in the expanded material. They are promised 20 blood rubies to kill the sorcerer. And once the sorcerer's dead, the other free tribes say, we will fight. So in this scene, and in the one afterwards, we learn a little bit more about who our hero is. So, The Rock is Matthias. As I mentioned, Matthias, he is an Akkadian. He is supposedly from this warrior tribe who are the greatest of assassins, trained for generations to become amazing assassins. He is one of the worst assassins in movie history. We will get into this more and more as the film goes on, but he is a shit assassin. There's something else we learn about Akkadians in a later scene, which is obviously going to be relevant to this one, which is that when an Akkadian makes an oath, they have to keep that oath. So one of the lines that is delivered by The Rock in this scene is,
as long as one of us still breathes, the sorcerer will die.
remember this, it becomes important later. So, the Akkadian assassins infiltrate Memnon's camp to try and kill the sorcerer. This is, however, where our comic relief character is introduced. His name, I think, was Arpid, and he's played by Grant Heslov. This character is annoying as fuck, and it's very cathartic how he gets punched in the face almost as soon as we meet him. But we find out just after this that there's a trap set for them. There are men lined up ready to get them when they try and kill the sorcerer. It's been a while since I've watched this film. When I saw this happen, in my mind I was like, obviously there's a trap. There's a sorcerer who can predict the future. We do find out a little later that this isn't what happened. Takmet, who is the name of the character played by Peter Facinelli, he betrayed his father and sold out the assassins. Fine, but think about how stupid it must be for you to be told that you are going to kill a sorcerer who can predict the future and not think maybe the sorcerer might know you're coming. To make this worse as well, when the Akkadians are moving through the camp, they move down the middle of the main lane of the camp. They're not off to the side, they're not behind the tents, they're not under the cover of shadow or darkness. They are just walking like crouched through the middle of the centre lane of the camp. Anybody could have come out of any tent or walked around any corner or looked down any lane and just seen these three buff armed people just skirting along the edge. Matthias' brother and unnamed red shirt get filled with arrows, but Matthias, he is an assassin and he keeps to his oath, so he tries to complete the mission. He enters the sorcerer's tent, pulls his bow taut and is ready to fire the shot, but the sorcerer turns around and it's revealed that it is a beautiful, scantily clad woman. And he pauses. He is a shit assassin. I don't care that he thought the sorcerer was a man. I don't give a shit, because he has been paid and he has to keep his oath. Let go of the arrow and your job is done. You are here, she is there, you have the weapon drawn, fucking kill her. I'm going to be honest, if I walked in and saw Kelly Hu stood there dressed like that, I'd pause as well. But he is a trained assassin. Fucking shoot her and leave. There is a deleted scene where she says to him, I know that you've never killed a woman before.
And I know that you've never killed a woman before. Will I be your first?
And this sort of explains a little bit more about his hesitation, because clearly in that way the character doesn't kill women, even though we're shown throughout this entire film that women in this particular setting are warriors as well. But this scene isn't in the final film, so we can't really count that as being evidence for why he doesn't fire. He's just a fucking idiot. Anyway, Matthias decides not to kill her for reasons. So we get a little bit of exposition scene where Takmet walks in with the head of his dad, the king of the tribe people, and he's like, I killed my dad, here's my loyalty. After this moment, Takmet becomes the right-hand man for Memnon. He's like in every scene, in all the council scenes, he's one of the only people who is in on the stuff that Memnon doesn't even tell his men. I wouldn't trust that guy. Like, if somebody came to me and was like, I pledge my loyalty by having betrayed my father, I'd be like, cool, well, I'll just keep you at arm's length. You can go out and do these missions away from me. Just no. Memnon is about to kill Matthias when the sorcerer steps in and says, no, you cannot kill him. You nor none of your men can kill him. It'll be bad because the gods favour him today. She does say, though, that you can't kill him on this night. Why not just kill him tomorrow? Just chain him up. Just chain him up, kill him tomorrow. It's fine. Job done. You don't need to go to the extreme lengths that they do of burying him up to the neck in sand and releasing fire ants. So Matthias regains consciousness and finds himself buried next to Arpid, the comic relief man. There's two guards there. One of them is using fire to get the ants to come out of their nests, so they'll go and sting Matthias and Arpid, killing them. So I looked a little bit into fire ants, and they don't kill you unless you're allergic. They just sting you and it hurts for like an hour. So I guess these are special ants. There's a deleted scene that explains how Arpid escapes from this. He says that when he was buried, they thought he was unconscious, but he was awake. And he actually filled his lungs with air so that there'd be space in his hole for him to get out. But this isn't in the final cut of the film. In the final cut of the film, he just gets out by unknown means, and he has perfectly predicted the bladder activity of a nearby guard and is able to sneak up on that guard and knock him out when the guard comes back from his piss. The second guard, who 10 seconds earlier was behind Matthias and Arpid, has decided to scale the rocks in front of them for no apparent reason, so he's easy prey to be knocked out as well. So Arpid frees Matthias under the agreement that he gets to go with him and experience his adventures. And Matthias says, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to Gomorrah, I think it's the city that they have in it, Gomorrah, and I'm going to kill Memnon. Not the sorcerer, Memnon. I thought the whole point of killing the sorcerer was because Memnon is untouchable because he has a sorcerer. Otherwise, why would they have not sent him to kill Memnon in the first place? Also, what happened to his other oath? He still has the blood rubies, he still has the payment, but he hasn't fulfilled the oath. He's not killed the sorcerer. So, what are you doing? Just because she's hot. Just because she's fit, he doesn't want to kill her. So we find ourselves in Memnon's council chamber with him and the sorcerer, who is now, for this moment on, is referred to as the sorceress. We find out later that she fucking hates Memnon. Like, he kidnapped her as a child and has kept her prisoner and forced her to make predictions for him. And we also find out he's a creepy fuck and he wants to basically bang her the moment he doesn't need her anymore, because there's some kind of law that's introduced where she says if someone has sex with her, she loses her powers. If she really hates him so much, why would she not just give him a false prediction when she sees him die? Because that's what I do. I would give him correct predictions up until a point where I watch him die in a fight, and then I'd be like, oh no, you're going to win. Oh, you're going to win. There's this moment, right, in the fight when someone charges towards you with a spear, and what you need to do is just stand still. Because if you don't stand still, then you'll lose the fight. But if you stand still, they trip over and break their neck, and it leads to the victory. Matthias and Arpid arrive at Gomorrah and need to get inside. And this is where Arpid drops this line.
You see? They've got the city sealed up tighter than a crab's buttocks.
I don't know. I actually don't know. But don't worry, because he gets punched in the face again. We get a nice scene of the bustling city. I always think it's quite cool to do this kind of thing in films. Just sort of, it makes the universe feel a lot bigger. And there's also...
Hey, soldier, those big muscles look cramped.
Perhaps one of us can help you relax.
Maybe all of us.
Moving on. Matthias enters the main square of the city, which people may recognise as Spartacus Square. So if people don't know what this is, in 1960, the film Spartacus, they built this gigantic set on the Universal backlot that was the set for the courtyard, the square area in Spartacus. And it burned down at some point in, I think, the 70s or 80s, but then they rebuilt it, and it's been on the set, used in various productions. But for this film, they had to reconstruct parts of it to make it look less Roman and more like the era in which The Scorpion King was filmed. And following this, the square actually became known as the Square of Warriors, I think it was, because that's what it was called in this film. And it was known as that until 2013, when it was eventually demolished because it became unsafe. While he's in the square, Matthias gets accosted by a group of kids who steal his gems. So he is still carrying around these 20 blood rubies that he has taken as payment and not fulfilled the oath for. The kids steal his purse full of gemstones, and so the Rock gives chase. He finds the kid gives him back the gemstones, and the Rock's like, do you want to earn this one? Why? You didn't fucking earn them. It's a good moment to talk about the comedy in this film. There are some moments that are actually genuinely really funny, and this is one of them. When the kid shows Matthias into the palace, they stop in a corridor because there's some guards running past, and Matthias is like, all right, I'll kill half, you kill half. And the kid's like... They take a detour into a side room, and this is where they meet Theoden da Vinci. So it's Bernard Hill who plays Theoden. But it was around the same time as well, actually, because Two Towers and this film came out at the same time. So he's doing both these roles simultaneously. And in this scene, he is in the process of creating gunpowder, like 3,000 years before it was actually made. When he's talking about this gunpowder, he's like, Memnon will want to use it for war. I was thinking, of course he will. It's an explosive. Why would you not use it for war? He's talking about clearing roadways. It's literally destructive by nature. And he says this about all his stuff. He's like, Memnon will want to use it for war. And he's got a fucking catapult in his room. He's got a piece of siege equipment. And when Matthias is like, what's this? He's like, oh, it was meant to be a fast means of transportation. It's like, no, it fucking wasn't. It's a catapult. It reminded me of that sketch from Mitchell and Webb where they have Professor Death. And and everything he invents is called like the Death Ray, but it doesn't kill people. He's just called Professor Death. And everyone's like, why would you call it a Death Ray if it doesn't kill people? It's like, oh, right, because he's called Professor Death. It's the same vibe of, oh, my inventions weren't meant for war. It's like, they clearly were.
I intended the dire death ray to be used for good, not evil.
Okay!
To help mankind, not to destroy it!
So this inventor, whose name is Philos, or Philos, but that probably never gets mentioned at any point, tells Matthias where to find Memnon. Out in the training courtyard, Memnon is showing off his fighting skills. Now we get on to the next chapter of why Matthias is a shit assassin. Matthias gets the high ground, he is above Memnon, and he draws his god bow. Before he fires, Matthias notices that there is another archer aiming for Memnon. I can understand a moment of hesitation as you watch this archer fire, but when everyone applauds, it's obvious this is a stunt. Matthias, just fire your fucking arrow. This is what you are here for. You are here to assassinate this man. Shoot. This moment is further complicated when the little kid who showed him the way in and was paid with the ruby is found with the ruby, and it's assumed, obviously, that he stole it, and the penalty for thievery is he's going to have his hand cut off. So now Matthias has to choose between shooting Memnon and saving the kid. The thing is, if he shot Memnon, nobody's going to give a shit about the kid. A little kid who was found having stolen one jewel, that's nothing compared to the assassination, the murder of their leader. If an arrow flew down out of nowhere and cut fucking Memnon's face in half, they're not going to be like, well, hold on to that kid, make sure that kid doesn't get away. They're going to immediately let go of the kid and get to battle stations because somebody has just murdered their leader. So obviously Matthias chooses to save the kid because he's the hero of this film. He then draws another arrow and he fires this at Memnon, but Memnon pulls up a sword and he blocks the arrow. The amount of force in an arrow fired by Matthias, Memnon would not be able to block that just by going. Matthias is now trying to escape, so he goes back to the inventor, was it Philos? The names are so forgettable. You remember Matthias because they say it about 1 billion times. The sorceress is called Cassandra, and I'm pretty sure it's only mentioned once or twice in the film. The names aren't that relevant. It's the inventor, man. It's Philos the inventor. He knows how things are done. So Matthias is looking for a way out, and he sees this catapult I mentioned earlier. And obviously the guy's like, it's meant to be a form of transportation, but I had trouble with the landing. Matthias gets into this thing and sets it off, and it fires him through a window. There is no possible way that this solution is better than just fighting the guards. How is using a catapult to fire yourself through a window out of a tower a better solution than just standing your ground as a warrior? He flies out of one tower into the other tower. There is no way he could have predicted that would happen. The most likely thing that would have happened is he would fly out of the window, fly across the gap, and splat on the floor. That was a stupid decision, and I will never accept any explanation for why he should have done it. People are going to be like, oh, well, he saw the catapult beforehand, and he saw the window, and he worked out the trajectory. No, he didn't. He killed himself. That's the end. There's so many moments in this film where he's dead. He is so dead. He crashes through the window and ends up in Memnon's harem, which is just a group of women who are there to basically pleasure the king. This scene does get the people's eyebrow, which I know we're all here for. But again, Matthias is a crap assassin because he gets immediately distracted by all these women who just take all his weapons off him. Are you telling me one of this great, he was trained for generations. The Akkadians are known for being incredibly well-trained, skilled, dangerous, threatening warriors, and all that happens is he sees a few pairs of tits and he's like, oh, and everyone just takes everything off him and he's got no weapons left anymore, completely disarmed. So when the guards come in, he's got nothing. My first thought when I was watching this scene was, why don't you just jump out the window, Matthias? Because clearly that was your solution last time you were in a situation where there were a bunch of guards coming for you and there was no way out. Just leap out the window. It's fucking fine. He had weapons last time as well and he still chose to fire himself out of the window. But no, he decides to stay and fight. And he disarms the guard, they're fighting. But one of the guards jumps on his back. Now, this is the second time in this film that somebody has jumped on his back. I'm starting to think maybe his training needed to consist more of worrying about people jumping on his back. Maybe it's because he's so broad. Maybe he's so wide. There's just too much back. There's too much back to protect. The way that Matthias escapes this scene is by running behind a rolling gong as people fire projectiles at him. Now, I'm not sure that this seems to me like something I've seen before. I could not understand when watching this why the archers continue to fire at him. He's behind an enormous metal disc. And alternatively, right, when he gets into the corridor, he is then side on and they just stop firing. Anyway, like the fucking moron he is, Matthias accidentally falls off the edge of this balcony and he's hanging on. He realises there's nothing he can do, so he lets go. Why did he think this would work? He is so high up. So the next scene opens with Matthias lying on the ground, bleeding out, bones broken, dead from fall damage. Okay, it doesn't, he's fine, but trust me, he's dead. It turns out that Matthias has looked his way into finding the sorceress again, who is currently bathing naked. I'm starting to think there might have been a reason why young Brad liked this film. The sorceress grabs a knife and she stands there ready to fight and she says, "Are you going to kill me or just stare at me?" Kill her. Fucking kill her. You've sworn an oath. Instead, he jumps into the pool with her and he says, "Take a breath," and clamps his hand over her entire face. It's really fortunate that despite being a fucking awful assassin, Matthias is in fact an expert in the Gomorrean drainage systems, because he knows for some reason that taking this huge slab plug out and draining himself and her out, that they'll eventually end up in a place they can escape. I mean, first of all, who builds a drain that's as big as a human? Like, I get maybe the pipes below, so you can go in and clean them, but why would you put a drain in a bath that's big enough for people to get in? The sorceress tells Matthias later on that the only reason that she got Memnon to spare him is because she knew that he was her only chance to escape. So if this is true, why is she getting really weird about him basically trying to get her out of the city? Because at this point she's stuck in the city on her own with nothing, naked. He is still her best chance. So you might not want to be manhandled by the guy who's supposed to kill you, but suck it up. Like, you're a sorceress. You know he's not going to kill you. You've already probably seen whatever future the two of you were going to have together. That's a good point, actually. Does she know that they're going to hook up? Because obviously it's a love story. We all know it's going to happen, but is she aware of this? If she can actively see the future, does she know they're going to bone? Like, does she know? She must know. She must see it in her head. Which is like, in that case, why would she be salty about like being taken away by him? She's like, "Oh, we're going to fall in love. He's a lovely guy." Matthias and the kidnapped sorceress have a very difficult time escaping the city. So what they do is they walk out the doors. That's it. Like the guards are closing the doors and they're just the last people to leave. You would think if a lockdown had been initiated, you would immediately stop people leaving. You wouldn't let people walk through as the doors were closing. I haven't talked too much so far about the acting and the dialogue in this film because it's an action film. The action set pieces are good. The plot is serviceable. Like, there's nothing really wrong with it. The visuals are fantastic. We'll talk a bit more about the practical effects and stuff later, but the film looks great. And for the most part, the acting, there's nothing really wrong with it. None of the actors are terrible. It's The Rock's first role, but he's fine. If he delivers a few lines in a weird way. This particular scene, the one that comes next, is the one that I think has got some of the daftest lines of dialogue.
Why should I make it easy for you? You're sworn to kill me.
Others will die first.
Also, this line does sort of confirm that he still thinks he has to kill her. Like, he is still under oath. He is supposed to kill this woman. Maybe he's going to use her to lure out Memnon for his own revenge, but he's got to kill her. Like, at some point, she's got to die. Because he made an oath, and Akkadians stick to their oath. So, understandably, Memnon is pissed. He's not very happy that his sorceress has been stolen. So, we see him he says a dozen of his best men to go and get her back. This scene also confirms that Memnon is just a massive fucking coward, because instead of going to get her himself, this woman that basically his entire existence relies upon, and also who he apparently wants to get with as well, so he obviously has affection for her. He doesn't go himself. He not only sends other people, but he also sends them with a poisoned arrow. So they're not even going to fight him like you know, what's the word I'm looking for? With honor. They're not going to fight him with honor. He's going to poison him. Also, if anybody's wondering, that bowl of scorpions is completely real. It's a real bowl full of real scorpions, and Stephen Brand did pick up one of them and put it on the back of his hand. Despite everything I've said, the sorceress should know the future, and she should know that Matthias isn't a threat. She tries to run away again, but he's tied a rope to her foot, which is, you know what, a good way of making sure she doesn't run away. But what I want to know is, how did he tie a rope to her foot without her noticing? She's awake. She's waiting for a chance to run away. She didn't notice before going to sleep, like, because that means she would have gone to sleep first, and he would have walked over and been like. So the sorceress explains to Matthias that she's been a prisoner since she was a child, and that she fucking hates Memnon. He immediately believes her. How does he know that she's not just bullshitting? So now we come to another one of the great action set pieces of this film, which is the sandstorm. Honestly, I think this film was just built of set pieces. I think that they wrote a bullet-pointed list of the stuff they wanted to have, and then tried to squeeze a plot in between them. But this scene opens with Matthias talking to his camel, because apparently he can talk to his camel. This is never explained. I don't know whether it's just that he's like affectionately talking to it, or whether he can actually communicate with it. But the camel does seem to understand people, because later on, the sorceress speaks to the camel, and it's like, okay. It doesn't say okay, but that's what I imagine it's thinking inside its head. Matthias also has the superpower to predict when sandstorms are coming. I've never lived in a desert, and I've not really talked to anybody who's spent a lot of time in a desert. But can you feel if a sandstorm is coming? Because like I can feel when it's going to rain, because you can feel the change in temperature of the air, and you can feel it get a bit more humid. Like there is a certain sensation that you can feel on your skin, which lets you know that it is going to rain. Like, can you do the same with a sandstorm? One thing that I do really like here is that Matthias has this weird crystal telescope. And it's like, I don't think it would work like that, but I like that they put a little bit of thought into him having some kind of old-fashioned style prop. This shot of him charging towards them with the sandstorm coming with him is awesome. I found the behind the scenes of this particular scene really funny, because if you're wondering, the way they did this was they blasted sand in the actors' faces. Like, a lot of this film has been done practically, and this was one of those scenes where they wanted to make it look as realistic as they could. So they literally got like fans and like what they called leaf blowers, like those kind of things, and just blasted sand at everybody in order to get the right kind of look. I like the idea that he is so much more familiar with this environment than they are, that they approach him with the numbers advantage in an open field, and he is like, I know this area well enough that I know how to defeat you all. Because not only does he use the sandstorm to his advantage and pick off a few of them outside, but he then enters a cave system and lures them in. And judging by the way he moves around this cave system, I think we have to assume he may be aware of it. He does say earlier on, when they're waiting for the storm, oh, it must be around here somewhere, which I think is a reference to the fact that he's looking for a specific cave system that he is familiar with. Matthias lures them into a cave, and in the opening bit of this cave, some of the men sink into quicksand. The visual of this quicksand is actually very good. I'm honestly not 100% sure how they achieved this practically. Also, the second guy to step forward and fall into the sand is a fucking idiot, and he deserves everything that happens to him. Once again, this whole scene is just fantastic, but there are so many things in it that are just stupid. Like, it's an action film, and it's a goofy action film, so you kind of have to forgive it, but like I said, when you go through it slowly and you're sort of looking for things to talk about, it's so daft. Like the bit where he poses as someone's shadow. Why? And then in the next room, when the guy gets caught by the snare and he's like pulled into a hole in the ceiling, how did Matthias have time to set that up? So this is where Thorak wanders outside and engages in the final duel of this section with The Rock. And The Rock wins. The Rock beats him down, sword to the chest, but just before The Rock finishes off the final person, he gets stabbed in the leg by the poison arrow. We get to see the aftermath of this battle in the sandstorm with bodies buried under the sand. And then there's the shot of The Rock standing up covered in sand in slow motion with swelling music. I'm gonna say this shot is amazing. Like I said, there's so many good shots in this film. This is why I'm really worried about moving on to the other films, because I like this one. Even though it's goofy and it's stupid and there's some bad dialogue and there's some visual effects that definitely haven't aged well, I like it. It's a good film, and there's so many moments like that where he rises out of the sand and you're like, oh yeah, Matthias, get in there. And I just know I'm waiting for when I get onto the second one, and then the third one, the fourth one. Like, how much worse can it really get? Like, is it going to be that the one that I watched as a kid is bad, but the rest are good? Like, I don't know. Before we get off this scene as well, the look on the sorceress's face when she's running towards Matthias is fucking hilarious. She's so happy. Look how happy she is. Poor Matthias has been affected by the scorpion venom, and is apparently dying, even though more scorpion venoms don't kill you. And I'm pretty sure the scorpions that they have in the film, someone can check this, but the closest I could find online was a Malaysian scorpion, and those things don't have a venom that can kill you again unless I think you're allergic. Something I discovered though, whilst looking into this type of scorpion and whether or not the scorpion venom will actually kill you, is that the condition of being affected by scorpion venom is called scorpionism. So the sorceress decides to use her powers to heal him, but she says he will always have the blood of the scorpion in his veins. So this implies that this is where he gets the name from. He's known as the Scorpion King because he has scorpion venom, or the scorpion blood, in his veins. So we have Matthias, the sorceress, and Arpid wandering around the desert, and they happen to come across Archie the Inventor. So now they're a foursome, and they go somewhere to find water, and they get caught in an ambush. This scene once again proves that Matthias is a shit assassin. He goes into an area he's not been before, and this area is surrounded by people. And these people, just fucking chads, with a little bit of a bush on top of their heads, and you don't see a single one of them. The gang are led into what is the new camp for the free tribe. So earlier on in the film, when the people paid Matthias, you know, when they paid him for that job he didn't do, that was the free tribes. Now he's been led into their new camp. Another fun fact for people, the cave that they're walking through to get into this area is in a place known as Bronson Canyon in Griffith Park in LA. And this particular cave has been used in loads of different films and TV shows, but the most well-known use of this particular cave is it was the Batcave entrance, or exit, for the Adam West Batman series. It's here we get reintroduced to Balthazar, or Michael Clark Duncan, who has been off the screen for too long. Balthazar wants to kill Matthias and the others because he doesn't want anyone to find the location of their camp. Balthazar asks his men to grab Cassandra, and Matthias is like, no, 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 any man who touches her will have to come through me. And the look she gives him.
First man to touch her will have to come through me.
It's funny though that he immediately just leaves her to go and have a fight. Like he's like, anybody who wants to touch her has to go through me, and then he walks off. It's like the bit in Titanic when she's like, I'll never let go, Jack, and immediately lets go. Like I know the sentiment is there. I know what she's saying. She'll never let go, as in her heart. But she lets go of him immediately. Here's the moment we've all been waiting for. The big slogfest between The Rock and Michael Clark Duncan. Two hefty men just going at each other. They initially start by swinging swords at each other, but both swords break. It's a really cool visual. Like I said, this film is full of really amazing moments that are just like, yeah! This fight was one of the big selling points of the film before the film came out, because these two beefy men were going toe to toe. And it turns out that behind the scenes, The Rock and Michael Clark Duncan were actually really good friends. And Michael Clark Duncan they wanted him for the role of Balthazar, but they didn't know that The Rock knew him. And they mentioned to The Rock, we got this character and we think that Michael Clark Duncan would be great. And The Rock was like, he's a good mate of mine. Let me give him a call. And he called him up and got him in on the film. But because they were good friends, there was this rivalry in the background, which obviously complemented the characters' relationship, where apparently The Rock kept leaving photos of himself in Michael Clark Duncan's trailer, writing on the photos a countdown of when the fight was going to happen. So in 2 days' time, he's like, 2 days to go. 1 day to go. Anyway, the actual fight between the two of them is very good. It's quite well choreographed, but for the most part, it's just two hunky men whacking each other. Because that's what they are. They're two really brutish people, and you want to feel the force of the way they fight. So there's a lot of posts being smashed, a lot of things being thrown around. I don't get how Matthias wins this fight. He wins it because he's the hero, but he gets the shit kicked out of him. There's a bit where Matthias jumps on Balthazar's back, and when I was watching this, I was like, yes, he's learned! He's learned from all the times it happened to him. There's one part of this fight where Matthias gets pinned behind a table, and he starts throwing stuff at Balthazar, because Balthazar's got a spear. He's trying to stop him from getting too close. And there's a bit where he picks up a chicken, and the gag is that he picks up a chicken, he's like, no, I won't throw the chicken. Why would you not throw the chicken? The chicken is the perfect weapon in that situation. You need time. Your issue is that you are stuck and the man in front of you has a spear and he's approaching you. You know what would get him to back off? Throwing a chicken in his face. It's after this fight scene when Matthias wins when we get like one of the trailer bait lines. When Balthazar's like, will you stand alone before Memnon and his armies?
Will you stand alone before the fury of his armies?
And The Rock's like, yes.
Yes.
And it's meant to be like this incredibly powerful, epic moment of like, yeah, he's a hero. But it's just, it was really funny.
Yes.
The three tribes decide to have a big party. Or at least that might just be what they do every night, but they're having a big party. And during this, the sorceress has a vision of everybody being dead. She goes to see Matthias, and for some reason, they've given Matthias what looks like the best house. There's like a raised platform, and there's a tent constructed on it, and it's full of all this cool stuff. And Matthias is in that tent. Why did he get the nice tent? He came into the camp as a prisoner. Was it because of his badass one-liner? Or was it because he beat up Balthazar? Like, why does he get the cool tent? It's such a minor point, but why? Why has he got a cool tent? Why have they not put him in the shit shack on the edge of the camp? Why has he not been given like a bedroll and a sheet and a stick? The sorceress sits down with Matthias, and she explains that everybody in the camp is going to die. She also has a vision of Matthias going to confront Memnon and also dying. She sees him get shot in the back with an arrow, and she says, if you go and face Memnon on your own, you will die. Matthias is obviously a hero, and he's stubborn, and he's like, no, I'm going to make my own destiny. In this situation, if I was the sorceress, and this person who at this point she clearly has affection for, is saying that he's going to basically run into certain death, I'd be like, okay, if you're going to do this, here is exactly what I saw. You were stood on this high thing, and then he pushed you off, and he looked down and said, it seems the gods favour me tonight, Akkadian. And then as you stood up, this archer came out from a door behind on the other side of the room, and the archer pulls an arrow and lets go, and it hits you in the back. I would say that exact phrasing so that then at least Matthias, in that situation, when he hears the line, it seems the gods favour me tonight, Akkadian, means he'd know that he'd have to turn around because there's an archer aiming an arrow at him. Why would you not give him the full details? The main thing that I feel like this film misses out on is the fact that they do not handle a character who can see the future particularly well. Like, they've established her as being capable of actively seeing the future. Whoever has her on their side wins. They say this at the start. The reason why Memnon wins every fight is because she can tell him how to win because she's seen how he wins. They now have the sorceress on their side. Use her! Instead, she's like, I've got to go back to him. I've got to go back to him or he'll come here. It's like, but if you're here, we have a bargaining chip. He wants you back. He wants you back because you secure his victory. The men need you there because obviously she's this big icon for them. And also he's got the hots for her. Why would her leaving be beneficial for them when she is their most powerful weapon against him? Not only does he want her back, but she can see the future. But instead of this, instead of utilising the fortune teller, the future seer, the premonitioner that they've got, instead, Matthias decides to sleep with her, which he admits at the end of the film, he knows the rumours, or the stories, that if you sleep with the sorceress, she loses her powers. So what he's doing is he's like, oh, we've got this massive advantage over our enemy. You know, the advantage that they used to conquer us, we've now got this advantage for us. You know what, I'm going to get rid of it because I want to get my dick wet. What a selfish bastard. He is a bad assassin and he is a bad hero. No. Bad Scorpion King. Bad. Also, this is a small point, but why does The Rock sleep on his back? Like, I know people sleep on their backs. It's a thing. I get it. But whenever I see anybody sleeping on their back, arms down their sides, face forwards, it just looks weird. And every single scene you see where The Rock is asleep, he is sleeping like that. And it just looks so wooden and stiff. It's not even a real complaint. I just don't like it. So morning comes, the sorceress has left to go back to Memnon because she stupidly and incorrectly thinks that it's the right thing to do to keep everybody safe. we're leading up to the big finale. All the three tribes are gathering together and they're going to go and storm the castle, and Matthias is going to go and get the sorcerers. He's going to kill Memnon. I've been talking for a while. This recording, like, we're at about the 2.5 hour mark. It takes so long to go through this stuff. Oh, bear with me. You know what? I'm having some water. I need some water. I'll have some water. I'll have some whiskey. We're barely even into this as well. Like, this is the first film of 5. And I'm not even at the end of this. And we've still got another 4 films to go. And this one's the good one. Oh. Memnon's having a big party to celebrate the upcoming victory, and I feel really sorry for the guards who drew the short straw and have to be on guard duty during the party. But this is where Memnon lying to his men comes full circle, because one of the men who challenged him earlier comes up and confronts him and says, "Where's the sorceress? We haven't seen her. She's a symbol for the men, and we don't want to go into a fight without having seen her." How complacent has the army got that they won't even go into battle without knowing they're gonna win? It just makes the army seem so pathetic. They need to see the sorceress, or they go, "Well, we're gonna lose now. If she's not told us we're gonna win." Unfortunately for this poor guard, the sorceress has impeccable timing and somehow managed to get to the city, into her quarters, I guess, into her clothes, and into that courtyard without anyone else knowing about it. So she turns up mid-conversation. So Memnon's like, "Well, is this the proof? Is this the proof you need, dickhead?" And then stabs the guy. I feel sorry for that guy. He was right. So the 3 tribes arrive in the city, and we get to hear what their plan is. So it turns out the plan is for the ground troops, effectively, to go and kill a bunch of the guards, disrupt the security, and then the inventor has to go and put gunpowder under the castle and blow it up. This plan doesn't make any sense to me. Like, are they trying to blow the castle up completely? Because that would kill everybody inside, including all of them. I don't understand what purpose the explosion has, except to look cool. We get a scene now where Memnon and the sorceress obviously talk, because she's been away and just randomly returned. And he says to her, "You seem diminished." And he has her test her power by waving a hand over some jars and finding the snakes he's put inside. This whole scene exists just so that he can be like, "You fucked, didn't you? You got some. I know you did."
You have lost your power. Thrown it all away.
We get to the big moment where Cassandra threatens Memnon with a snake. It's a CGI snake, and you know what? I'm not going to judge them too much. Like, this isn't Lord of the Rings, so it's fine. You know what the snake is better than? The huge CGI scorpion king from The Mummy Returns, which I forgot to mention earlier. Yeah, no, he comes back at the end of the film as a big CGI scorpion, and it looks fucking dreadful. While the snake threatening bit is happening, Matthias is above on like a little ledge, and he's preparing to jump down. But I was just thinking in this scene, if Matthias had brought a bow, I know he lost his bow got taken earlier by the women in the harem, and now Carlisle Cullen. If people wonder, by the way, Carlisle Cullen is the dad in Twilight. It's another role that the actor who's playing Takmet played. That's why I keep calling him Carlisle Cullen, because I think it's funny. But yeah, no, he had the bow, so we know that Matthias doesn't have his bow. But if he'd brought any other bow, at this point, he could just shoot Memnon in the back, and he's done. It's done. He's got the drop on him. But instead, he jumps on the drapes and swings down and goes for like a big kick. I also thought it'd be really funny if the drapes just didn't break here, and he jumped and grabbed them, and they just didn't tear, and he's just hanging on the ceiling like this. But yeah, Matthias drops down, he draws a sword, and this is the point where I'm like, once again, Matthias is a fucking moron. Because the one thing we know about Stephen Brand's character, about Memnon, is that he is the greatest swordsman that the world has ever seen. Like, of an army of thousands of people, he is the best swordsman. Like, it's said constantly throughout the film, he is the best swordsman. Why would you challenge him to a sword fight? Why would you even get close to him when he's got a sword? You're gonna lose. That's his whole thing. Get your bow. Get a bow. Shoot him. That's your thing. There's a fantastic line here that I really like. I'm just gonna play it.
The assassin and the sorceress. How romantic.
I'll bury you both together!
It's a great line, but I do have to clarify, he's not an assassin. He's shit at it. Early on in this fight, Memnon gets a couple of slashes in. It's looking like Matthias is going to have trouble because obviously he's just been injured. But no, he's not injured. The slashes exist so they can cut off his clothes. So we get to see the rippling physique of The Rock. Now, I don't think anyone's really complaining. We're all happy to see rippling Rock physique. But it is just really funny that that's the only reason he manages to get the cuts through. There's a lot of things in the film that only happen to show off The Rock. There's another one coming up in a sec. Considering he is the greatest swordsman though, Memnon is a dirty fucking fighter. All the way through this scene, he's finding ways of stopping it from just being a one-on-one duel. A duel which he should just win. He should easily win this duel. He kicks over the snakes, and all the snakes for some reason have a target lock on Matthias. They don't go near Memnon, they only go for Matthias every time. He also knocks over some braziers and starts a fire, and then there's later on when he throws some ash in and some embers into Matthias's eyes. He's a dirty fighter, it's disgusting. But there's also a bit in this fight, and this is, you know, at the start when I mentioned the guy who pulled out the weapons and the retractable blades, and it was like, what the fuck? Why? Where did you get this from? This came out of nowhere. So the same thing happens in this scene with Memnon. So in the middle of the fight, after having dueled for a decent chunk of time, we see Memnon split his sword in half, and it becomes two swords. And when this moment happened, I had to pause it, because I'm just like, why? Where did you get this sword from? Did Phylos make it? Was this another one of Phylos' inventions where he was like, I did not design this sword for war. I designed it to cut cheese. In order to have a sword that can split in two, you would need either the two halves to be like half of the blade, which means there would be a sort of bluntish bit in the middle where the two sharp edges have to touch each other, or there'd be a gap, which means that when you cut things, you wouldn't be able to do a single slash, you would do like a little double ribbon slash. Like, this sword just seems like it'll be very ineffective. But then, when you split it in half, is there like half a hilt on each side? I want to see the prop, because you can't really see it too much when you watch the film, but they just feel logistically like they just wouldn't be very good. However, it's fucking awesome. Like I said, there's moments in this film where you're just like, just after Memnon splits his blades in half, he like goes full on, like full double sword thrasher mode on The Rock, and the expression on his face again is fantastic. There's so many good expressions on The Rock. So as if this scene couldn't get any cooler, Balthazar turns up. He turns up at the door, and Memnon, realizing that he's in trouble, decides to tell his guards to kill the sorceress. And so the guards start going for her, and she's a fucking badass. There's obviously a trope in films about the damsel and how she has to be rescued, and like, to be fair, Memnon does grab her in a bit and drag her out and she has to be rescued, but when he sets the guards on her, she fucking murders them. She is amazing. Like, she just destroys these people. This film was made in 2002, so the attitudes towards women and the way they're represented and stuff, like, there are some bits that are quite questionable, but one thing I will say about it is that there's a lot of women in this who are very good warriors, and it's something you don't get in a lot of films that are sort of representing these older eras. Like Queen Isis and all of her warriors, like, they're all extremely scantily clad, but they're fantastic fighters. They're also, in a lot of scenes, fighting men. Also, I guess it's worth pointing out as well that even though the women are in very revealing clothing, there is also a lot of sexualization and stuff put onto The Rock and onto Michael Clarke Duncan and the men's muscles. So fair play for representing both sides. Everybody needs somebody to get their jollies off to. After she proves she can't be taken out by some shitty guard, Memnon grabs the sorceress and drags her outside, covering his path with a flaming drape. And obviously, The Rock has to go after her. So while Matthias is going to fight Memnon, you're probably wondering what's happening to the real hero of the story, Balthazar. Well, he's in a corridor getting run down by a horse because Takmet, for some reason, has decided to ride a horse into the castle, and naturally he gets fucking owned and Balthazar delivers a blow to him as revenge for him having murdered his father. So we'll see you again in Forks, won't we? I would love it if in the Twilight films they put in like an Easter egg to the Scorpion King, and it turns out that this death is the canonical death of what happened to Carlisle Cullen before he became a vampire and eventually became Carlisle. Because I don't know is it in the book, like what happened to Carlisle? Because I know that some of the vampires in that story have backstories of how they got turned. I don't know Carlisle's. I don't know what happened to him, but obviously I assume he's the oldest in terms of like vampiric. He's from the oldest time period because he is the father of them. Or maybe he's just the father because he looks older. Because it is a bit weird. Like vampires don't age, but for some reason the parents are older, like visibly older, and the people who are their children or who they've adopted, unless they're all meant to be equals and they just take on the roles of those family members for the purpose of keeping up appearances to the public. You know, this is not what I should be talking about in a Scorpion King video. If this channel does well, I will do this for the Twilight films. I've seen the Twilight films more times than I should have done, and you know what? They're not the worst things I've ever seen, but they're also pretty fucking shite. So I would be quite happy to go back and watch the Twilight films and rip them apart. So, the big finale, the big final fight between Matthias and Memnon. The first thing that happens is that Cassandra, sorceress, just gets thrown onto a table and whacks her head on like the corner post of the table, and it looks so brutal. So if you thought that the dividing sword and dual wielding wasn't epic enough, now Memnon sets fire to his swords. If anyone's wondering if the fire is real, yes. The fire in these scenes, for the most part, is real. They add in a few extra little bits and flares and stuff to sort of amplify the effect. But for the most part, Stephen Brand is really dual-wielding flaming swords. So they had to teach him to fight ambidextrously with swords that are on fire. And you might be thinking, why go to so much effort? Well, it turns out the reason they did this is because they didn't think that anybody could realistically look like they could take on The Rock. Because The Rock is this massive, muscular guy. He's very imposing. And to them, they were like, our villain can't just look like he can fight The Rock. Like, that's boring. What if we make him so he looks like he's so skilled and he's basically doing something no one else can do, but he's also got flaming weapons? This is the only way we can make it look like The Rock is going to have trouble. And I think that is amazing. I gotta say, this is the shit you want in a crappy, goofy action movie. Your two people, your hero and your villain, fighting on a precarious ledge, one of them shirtless with rippling abs, the other one with two flaming swords clad in black. Like, this is the shit you want. Hollywood, take note, this is what we want in our action films. The greater of the two swordsmen prevails, and Matthias is disarmed and kicked to the ground by Memnon. You may be wondering, why would he kick him to the ground when he could have just slashed him or stabbed him or pushed him over the edge? The reason this happened is because the filmmakers wanted to show off The Rock doing something that they didn't think people would be able to believe he could do. So, The Rock, I think in the behind the scenes stuff they say is 6'3". He's a very tall man. He's also a very broad man. He's a very muscular man. And there's one thing that he could do that they thought that nobody else his size would have been able to do. And I can't remember the real name of it, but it's the thing where you kick yourself up, like you throw yourself up from your hands, stood up. Like, I'll play the clip.
Die well, assassin.
So that's the reason that shot's in there. The only reason that Memnon doesn't like slash him or boot him off or whatever is because they wanted The Rock to be on the floor on his back so he could perform this trick. And you know what? It's awesome. It looks great. He jumps up, he catches hold of Memnon's arms, and he squeezes him, and Memnon drops the swords. I don't know why he lets go. Like, you've got him. You've got him here. You've got all of his arms. Kick him in the balls. Headbutt him. Do anything except let go. But he lets go, throws a few blows, but obviously Memnon's the villain. He's not going to fight fair. He throws embers in The Rock's face, and then he knocks him off, and The Rock goes through a table. Because of course he goes through a table. And it's then you hear the line, "It seems the gods favour me tonight, Akkadian." If only the sorceress had told him exactly what line to listen for, so he'd know to look out for being shot in the back. The sorceress at this point regains consciousness. She realizes the moment she's seen, and she tries to jump in the way of the arrow, and the rock spins around and he takes the arrow anyway. So he's got an arrow in his back. So at this point, all seems lost. Matthias has been shot in the back. There's loads of extra reinforcements arriving to fight all of the people on the ground, and the explosion isn't going to happen because the guards have essentially arrested Phylos and Arpid. You'd think I'd know by now. Also, while this is happening, we get to see the sorceress being a fucking boss again. She's a great character. I hope she's in the sequels. Because like I said, I don't know anything about them apart from the little bit of the second one I've seen, and that I don't think The Rock's in them. He might make a cameo, but I don't think he's in them because I think I looked through and the main character, like Matthias, is played by different people in a few of them. So I don't think he comes back, but I hope she's in them because she has to be. Matthias finds his bow on the table, the one that Takmet left there, and he pulls the arrow out of his back like a badass, and he draws it. And Memnon, obviously, we've seen him earlier stopping arrows mid-flight, so he prepares for this. He thinks he can stop this arrow. But we know that the Rock's bow fires arrows like a fucking sniper rifle. The arrow goes too fast, Memnon gets blasted off the tower, the explosion happens, he falls into the explosion. We also see Balthazar escaping the explosion like the dog from Independence Day. I'd like to reiterate, what was the point of the explosion? It serves no purpose. Like, it doesn't clear out the guards or anything. It doesn't really help that much. All it does is put everybody in danger. Because the moment that Matthias kills Memnon, everybody just looks at him and calls him the king anyway. I thought they established earlier on that the strongest person amongst their ranks is the one who became the king. Not that whoever kills the king becomes the king. But doesn't matter. Matthias is now the king. And they call him the Scorpion King because he has scorpion blood in him. So we get our last little scene where the three tribes are heading home, and Balthazar and Matthias exchange some words, and Balthazar says,
"Don't forget how you got here, or the people you came from."
Awkward. The sorceress tells the Rock that she sees like years of peace and prosperity, and the Rock's like, well, how would you know that?
Don't the legends say you'll lose your powers if you...
Can you think of a better way to keep a king from taking advantage?
He also asks her how long things are going to be good for, and she says nothing lasts forever. And you can see by the look on her face, like they're implying that she knows. Like, she knows that he's going to turn into a tyrant within 10 years, apparently. You'd think that'd be something you'd want to try and change. Like, she knows she can change her visions, right? The one she saw when Memnon attacked the camp, that didn't happen. That wasn't a thing. But there we are, roll the credits, that was the Scorpion King. Last little thing before we get on to the conclusion, apparently David Hayter helped write this script. People don't know David Hayter is Solid Snake, which is, I know he writes scripts, like I think he wrote X-Men and a few others, but it's just funny. So I think I've said a lot of the stuff I wanted to say about this film through the process of going through it, but there's a few little things I want to bring up, one of which is you can tell that there was a lot of love and passion that went into this film. Like I said, the practical effects are everywhere. They went above and beyond to make this film look as amazing as possible. They built giant sets and used like matte painting set extensions and things to expand those. They also used real live animals for a lot of it. They used practical effects wherever they could, like fire effects and sand and everything that they tried to do for real. The weird thing that hangs over my head about this film though is the character of the Scorpion King is so different to how he is in The Mummy Returns. In that film, they describe him as basically being exactly the same as Memnon. He's this like ruthless tyrant who's trying to take over the known world. Like, that's what Memnon's doing. So they made a villain for this film who is basically the character the film's about. But obviously they've said that the Scorpion King that we see in The Mummy Returns is him in 10 years' time. And it seems weird to think that he's going to go from who he is now, which is the action hero, to the tyrant. Something else that eagle-eyed viewers may also notice about this film is that Memnon himself is also obsessed with scorpions. The statue of him in the Square of Warriors has like a scorpion pendant. In his like throne room, there's a scorpion carved into something that's in the background somewhere, and also he's got that big bowl of scorpions. So it turns out there's a lot of deleted scenes from this film that explain why he has this weird scorpion obsession. There's this prophecy supposedly made about somebody who will essentially bathe under moonlight on the night of the House of Scorpio, and become an immortal god being. And like, there's a lot of stuff that was cut out about this. There's so many scenes. The bit where Memnon is stood on the raised platform and he's like got the two swords, he's about to stop the arrow. Before that, he stands on like a scorpion platform and bathes in the moonlight. And after this, he thinks he's invincible, which is why he doesn't hesitate about stopping the arrow. And then when he dies and Matthias walks to the front over like the army of men who all start calling him the king, that's the reason why the moon is over his shoulders so prominently, because the moon is meant to be this big part of this prophecy. And during the deleted scene of this scene, all of the people in the crowd start chanting about this prophecy because it's now meant to apply to Matthias, implying that he's like this powerful, immortal, blessed by the gods, Scorpio being. But I think it's a good idea they cut all this out. It definitely bogs down the movie and it makes it feel a lot sillier. But the one reason why I'm sad that they cut this out is because by cutting this out, they cut out what is probably the best one-liner in the entire movie. Just before Matthias fires the arrow that kills Memnon, he says, "Catch this," and then releases the arrow. That's his one-liner. That's his like action hero. End of movie, you're dead.
Catch this.
In the deleted scene, Memnon says something about the prophecy to Matthias.
The prophecy says I am one with the gods.
And Matthias says back, before he fires his arrow, he pulls it taut and he says, "My prophecy is, you're dead."
My prophecy says, you're dead.
Why didn't that make it into the film? What a line. It's very obvious from all of the behind the scenes material and the promotion for this film that they were really trying hard to make The Rock the next big action star. And even though reviews for this were very mixed, everybody for the most part agreed the one thing that was clear about this was The Rock was going to be massive. Like Michael Clarke Duncan even says this in the behind the scenes, like, you can tell The Rock is going to be the next big action star. And to be fair, they were right. He did become a big action star and he's been in loads of things since. And despite the reviews for this film not being fantastic, according to Box Office Mojo, the film made $180 million from a budget of $60 million, which is a pretty hefty haul. It seems like a no-brainer to make a big, epic sequel to this film. You have The Rock, the leading man who is the next big action star. You've got a storyline that isn't finished, because we don't know how we get from Scorpion King in The Scorpion King to Scorpion King The Mummy Returns. And we also have a film which made an extremely huge profit at the box office. So what's going to happen in The Scorpion King 2? Are we going to find out what Matthias does now that he's the ruler of Gomorrah? Are we going to find out what happens in his relationship with Cassandra, and whether or not her prophecies for the future will end up leading to him discovering what he's going to become? What's going to happen to the Free Tribes, and to Balthazar, and to all these characters we've come to love? Well, we're not going to find out yet, because The Scorpion King 2 is a fucking prequel. If you are watching this, then you've made it to the end of the video. So first of all, well done. It's quite a long one. But also, thank you very much for watching. This is the first video on a completely new channel. Break Brad used to be a short-lived series over on another channel, the Untitled Side channel. And the series was just where I would complain about things. I made a video essay there about the character Cole from Charmed, and I really enjoyed the process of making that, of finding the clips, of doing the research, of presenting, editing, etc. So I wanted to spin that off into its own channel. So what you're going to be getting here is more of those video essays about films, TV shows, etc., but also the occasional rant about something stupid or annoying that's happened in my life, just for me to vent and get it out there. I also have plans for a mini podcast series, something that I could do with friends where I get them to talk about things that annoy them. So that'll be coming out as soon as I film more episodes. I also want to resurrect an idea that, again, was on the Untitled Side channel, but I never really got to fully realise. And that was something called Brad's Workshop. So Brad's Workshop was a way for me to put ideas out there and say, like, I think this would be good. I think this would be a good thing. Then people can say, no, it's not. You're completely wrong. Anyway, with this being a completely new venture, one of the most important things is getting the feedback from the people who watch it. So if you're watching this bit, you've watched the whole thing. What I want to know is, what did you think of the video? Did you enjoy it? Were there some good things? Were there some bad things? I personally think I may have gone into a little bit too much detail on this film, but other people may not agree. So I want to hear what other people think about that. So let me know in the comments the good things, the bad things, etc. You can also comment below with ideas for other things I could watch. For example, there's a horror film that I plan to watch, which I consider to be the worst horror film ever. I've never seen one worse. I gave this horror film to a group who watch horror films weekly, and they said it was the worst one they'd ever seen. So I plan to watch that at some point in the future and talk about that. With this being the first part of a 5-part series about the Scorpion King, I'm hoping that my style and the way I present and the way I edit these videos is going to evolve with each one, so that by the time I reach the 5th one, I'll have settled into a comfortable style. So this is the perfect opportunity, if you are watching this, to get into the ground level and help me grow this concept. And another very important thing that you can do to help me grow this is to send it to other people. So if you enjoyed it, send it to somebody else you think would enjoy it. Send it to 2 people. If you send it to 2 people, they send it to 2 people, and they send it to 2 people, then eventually it'll reach everybody in the world, and I can then retire from the ad revenue. So do that. So yeah, thank you again, and hopefully I'll see you in the next part when we watch The Scorpion King 2, Rise of the Warrior. Now, at the time of recording this part now, not the part you've just watched, but this part now, I've watched the second one. I have watched it, and it's fucking dreadful. So look forward to seeing me tear that apart, because there are some parts I had to pause the film because it was so funny. It was so bad that I had to pause it and just take a moment. So subscribe so that you can get notified, blah blah, bell, etc., to come back and watch that. Or just go away and watch it. Just go away and watch it yourself. It's awful. Anyway, that's enough from me. Enjoy the rest of your day. See you next time.